Hi, my name is Stephen Lay and I'm the owner of Fitness 360. Today's short take topic is training to failure. So training to failure, the concept of training to failure is actually pretty easy. It's the point at which you can no longer concentrically contract the muscle. So in a bicep curl, I can no longer get my arm to go any further. That would be failure. It's a little different in a compound exercise like a bench press. So I'm going to demonstrate that because there are some nuances to that. So why would you train to failure? The science does seem to indicate that training to failure is a good way or a promising way to help the muscles grow and respond a little bit better to the exercise. Now, it's not complete in this respect that we don't know exactly the reasons why, whether it's more muscle recruitment, more metabolic damage, or what the actual trigger or the mechanism is that it does that seems to make it work. But what we have found, or what the science has shown us, is that going close to failure, maybe one repetition or two repetitions shy of failure, is probably just as good as going to failure. Now, what I'd like to show you is kind of going to failure on a compound exercise in my view or take on what failure is in an exercise like this. So I'll demonstrate. So normally when you start the exercise, let's say if it's a set of 10 repetitions. So the first repetitions will typically be nice and smooth. Everything really starts looking good. And I start to get a little bit tired during the set, and they will slow down. My breathing will become a little labored. And then at some point, start to lose my form a little bit, but I still might have another one. Okay, so that's what it looks like to train to failure. But what I would say is that you've actually trained to failure at the point that your form goes south, right? So I was able to perform another repetition after my form was suffering, right? And so my point here is this, is that the reason that your form suffers is because the muscles that you're targeting have already failed, right? So now what you're doing is you're recruiting other muscles by changing the form in order to get the weight up. But that's not the goal. The goal is to fatigue the muscles that you're targeting. So I would argue that you really don't need to just go to the end where you can just get that last rep, but maybe 2 or 3 repetitions before that are just shy of actual failure of the muscle, right? So keep that in mind. And the last point I want to make is that failure training works better when you're using slightly lighter weights. So potentially 10 repetitions to 15 or 20 repetitions would be a rep range that training to failure, very close to failure, makes a lot of sense. As you get heavier, there's more risk involved. So let's say you're doing a weight that's 3 repetitions or 5 repetitions, as much as you can do, but you're going to failure. The injury risk is greatly amplified if you're going to failure with a heavy weight. So now as your form goes south and you're switching and moving your body, bad things can happen. So my recommendation is that if you want to train to failure or close to failure, do it with slightly lighter weights. And as you use your heavier weights, go a little less, kind of less close to failure. That way you're a little safer. Besides, typically that heavier weight is going to be developing strength, and you really don't need to go to failure to do that. I hope you enjoyed today's short take, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.